After a catastrophic fall, André Rieu, who made a fortune performing waltzes, abruptly cancelled everything. His body eventually gave out in Mexico City at the age of 74. Shows were cancelled, fans were sent home, and now his son is running his enormous business. The startling reality, even though he vowed to continue playing until he was 140, the guy who owns 80 homes and puts on 100 events a year may have to retire. His final performance in Maastricht may be his ultimate farewell. Born in 1949 in Maastricht, Netherlands, André Rieu came from a family that valued music above all else, yet struggled to find love. The Maastricht Symphony Orchestra was conducted by his father, a somber man who valued discipline over love. Growing up, their household felt more like a military camp than a sanctuary for children, and André was the third of 6 children. Warmth and hugs were infrequent. His parents were devout Roman Catholics, who valued silence and following the law. Friends were not permitted to visit. They hardly laughed. "My parents didn't really love me," André once said. It wasn't a guess. He had a strong belief in it, and he carried it with him. André's innate exuberance and his parents' chilly mannerisms clashed from an early age. When professors referred to André as an artist, his mother felt humiliated since she was so preoccupied with his academics and music practice. Unless he was functioning flawlessly, André felt invisible with that type of mentality. He tried to figure out why his upbringing seemed so empty for years in therapy. Perhaps, though, that nothingness turned into fuel that would eventually enable him to alter the way that classical music is perceived worldwide. Something unexpected happened when she was 5 years old. André fell in love with his violin teacher rather than the instrument itself. She was gorgeous, blonde, and 18. He was so preoccupied by her that he found it difficult to concentrate in class. But he had a motive to take up the guitar every day, because of that crush. Technique and scales didn't matter to him. All he wanted to do was play like her. While other children were still having trouble with simple notes, André was able to figure out vibrato, the emotional wobble and sound that gives music life, in just a few weeks after seeing her hands, motions and sound. It was feeling, not perfection, that stayed with him. The conflict with his father only worsened as he grew older. André had no desire to perform stifling, solemn classical music. He aimed to make it lively, enjoyable, and joyous. However, such notion was offensive to his father. His father yelled, "I didn't teach you to do waltzes," when André expressed his desire to play them. A chilly denial was given. When André brought his future bride, Marjorie, home, the situation became even more chilly. Rather than extending a warm greeting, his mother urged her to go and instructed André to return to his tidy room like a child. The last straw was that. He never turned around after leaving with Marjorie. His parents never attended any of his concerts after that day, not even when he was packing arenas across the globe. His father passed away in 1992 without ever witnessing André's transformation. André, however, was formulating a strategy behind all of this rejection. He began to notice anything odd while playing in his father's symphony. The majority of the musicians appeared uninterested in the song, discussed the weather. They had grievances over their compensation. It was dead. However, something extraordinary occurred during the encores. The audience would come alive as the orchestra played a Strauss waltz. People grinned. They hummed. The vibe shifted. André realized then that this was the type of music he wanted to perform, to move people, not to win over detractors. He once sang a gentle song for a dying woman who had been unconscious for days. But she opened them as the music entered the room. André realized the actual power of music at that precise moment. It was about feeling, not about being flawless. At that point, the notion of forming his own orchestra began to take shape. André began modestly in 1978, when he was 29 years old, had a newborn kid at home, and had little money to spare. He assembled a small group of musicians to establish the Maastricht Salon Orchestra. Anywhere they could, they played. Municipal halls, weddings and border towns close to Belgium and Germany. They performed salon music and vintage waltzes that most people had forgotten. It wasn't glitzy. Their earnings were meager. André didn't care though. He was engaged in his passion. He once played the Gold and Silver Waltz by Franz Lehár during a brief performance. He gave it everything he had, and something changed. He felt as though the music was responding to him. He made up his mind that evening. His future lay in this. It was corny, but it didn't matter to him. If the elite laughed, it didn't matter to him. He thought that classical music might be happy, and until everyone else saw it, he would not stop. André Rieu found himself in a pivotal moment in 1987. He had been the conductor of the Maastricht Salon Orchestra for about 10 years and was almost 40 years old. However, something didn't feel right. The thrill had vanished. The boundaries were obvious, and the outdated format was no longer sufficient. Something larger was what he desired. He wanted to do more than just perform music. He desired to work magic. When Johann Strauss himself played the violin and conducted, his entire body moved in time with the rhythm. Others used to experience the same type of joy and spectacle, that vitality, that enjoyment, that feeling of life. Rieu wished to revive it, but the choice wasn't simple. There was a huge risk involved in starting something new. He wasn't wealthy, and paying professional musicians cost actual money. He put greater financial strain on himself with each musician he hired. Classical music wasn't exactly known for taking chances, and reservations weren't assured, but he felt deep down that he had to give it a go. The Johann Strauss Orchestra, his new brainchild, had its debut concert on January 1, 1988. It wasn't big. There were only 12 musicians and a small audience, yet something about it seemed unique. Rieu disregarded the regulations. The orchestra was not dressed in the customary black. He didn't maintain a formal silent stage. He added theatrical flair, dramatic lighting, folk music and laughing. It was unpopular with critics. They referred to it as gimmicky and cheap, but the audience, they grinned, cheered, and participated. Rieu was determined to keep the spark he had discovered. Then came the turning point in the story. The Champions League final was held in Vienna in May 1995. While Bayern Munich and Ajax were fighting, an odd incident occurred at halftime. Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2 was played by Rieu and his orchestra as they took the field. A TV ad had made the song well known to Dutch viewers, but none anticipated what would happen next. The whole stadium, 50,000 football fans, began to lose themselves in the music, swaying and humming. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. Throughout Europe, 300 million people saw the event live thanks to cameras. It was a cultural shockwave rather than merely a halftime spectacle. During the next few weeks, 200,000 CDs were sold by Rieu. The previous year's release of the album Strauss & Company was abruptly a hit. It became the best-selling album in the Netherlands for the whole decade after spending 19 weeks at the top of the charts. Now, people who had never been interested in classical music were purchasing his recordings, attending his performances, and becoming enamored with his waltzes. That football game is still cited by music scholars as the turning point for André Rieu, who went beyond being a violinist. He turned into a movement. Not everyone, however, was overjoyed. The world of classical music retaliated forcefully. They accused him of converting centuries-old music into a circus, dubbed him a charlatan, and claimed he was killing tradition. A well-known conductor even referred to his performances as musical erotica in one harsh assessment. The large sets, the theatrical jokes, the bright outfits, and the straightforward arrangements were all despised by the reviewers. In 2008, things became much more heated. When Rieu recreated the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, just for the stage background, there are fountains, ice rinks, horses, and everything else. Purists appalled at the 34 million euros it cost. But Rieu refused to give up. He felt that everyone, not only concert hall pros, should be able to enjoy music. He desired everyone, children, parents, instructors, housekeepers, etc., to appreciate the same music that was previously restricted by rigid customs. And it was difficult to deny the reality. He was adored by millions of admirers. His shows were crowded. In the aisles they danced. They also purchased albums. Many of them, Strauss & Company, had already caused a stir in 1994. However, it took off following that 1995 performance. Within months, 750,000 copies were sold in the Netherlands alone. It broke into the top 5 on the German charts, which is unprecedented for classical music. It sold more than 3 million copies worldwide by the time it reached its peak. In important European regions, it outsold some of the biggest pop stars, such as Bon Jovi and Celine Dion. Because of him, even major record stores began to give classical music greater shelf space. It was dubbed the Rieu effect by industry insiders. His records were more profitable than those of any other classical performer, according to Universal Music. He was reinventing the industry in addition to creating music. All of this resulted from that one dangerous choice made in 1987. He was perceived as being conceited when he named his group after Johann Strauss. He eventually disproved them, though. He brought Strauss back to life, not replaced him. Strauss's waltzes were becoming less popular in the 1980s. They were seldom being played. However, Rieu was largely responsible for the 16-fold rise in Strauss's music performances by 2010. His orchestra, which began with just 12 members, had expanded to almost 60, surpassing Strauss's own. Rieu expressed his profound appreciation for Strauss in a tribute CD he issued in 1999 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of his passing. For preserving the nation's musical legacy, the Austrian government even gave him one of their greatest national honors. André Rieu transformed classical music into a worldwide phenomenon. He performed something in 2008 that nobody saw coming from a violinist. He constructed and toured a massive model of Schönebrunn Palace in Vienna. We are discussing a full-scale castle that accompanied him on his global travels. It was more than a background. It included authentic chandeliers, ice rinks, fountains, and even Vienna-style horse-drawn carriages. It wasn't only for show, it was larger than anything the Rolling Stones had ever constructed. Rieu aimed to make Vienna's enchantment accessible to those who could never afford to visit. The logistics were crazy. It took 100 men 6 days to erect the stage each time he set up, but it was worthwhile. Stadiums in Australia and Europe were crowded. He broke the record for the largest classical performance ever staged in Australia when 38,605 people flocked to the Telstra Dome in Melbourne alone to see him perform. In that city, around 90,000 people attended 3 concerts, and in Europe, back home, arenas were selling out as quickly as he was. His DVDs were dominating the charts in Australia at one time, taking 8 of the top 10 positions. Only AC/DC and Pink were able to enter covertly. This wasn't only a run of good fortune. Rieu's performances gained so much popularity that he was able to join the likes of Madonna and the Police in the top 10 list of the world's highest-grossing tours. That's not bad for the king of the waltz. If that wasn't enough, he received over 500 platinum medals for the sales of his albums and DVDs. No other classical musician has ever surpassed that figure. Universal Music presented him with a personalized chrome violin trophy to commemorate the occasion. They claim to have never witnessed such success in the music industry, but not everything was sunshine and roses. What should have been a happy Christmas trip in the UK was marred by tragedy in 2016. Ruud Merckx, Rieu's long-standing trombonist, passed away unexpectedly in his sleep when the orchestra was in Leeds. He had spent more than 20 years with Rieu. He was accompanied by his wife, who plays violin in the orchestra. Back home they had 2 kids. The group was struck in the chest by the moment. Rieu made no hesitation. That evening he called off the Nottingham event, and he quickly delayed the remainder of the UK tour. Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham and London are no longer on the schedule. Rieu meant it when he referred to his orchestra as a family. Many of them had spent over 25 years with him. It was sad to lose one of their own just before Christmas. 5 days after being transported back to the Netherlands, Merckx died. Something had changed by the time Rieu returned to the UK in March. The audiences were less, but the enchantment remained. Both he and others recalled what had transpired in December. After decades of captivating the world with his music, André Rieu almost went bankrupt upon returning to Mexico City in March 2024. Before his body abruptly failed, he was still touring the world at the age of 74 with the vitality of a guy half his age. André passed out after just 2 shows due to a terrible combination of high altitude, jet lag, and a bad case of the illness. He was forced over the brink by Mexico City, which is more than 2,000 meters above sea level. Even the musicians of his orchestra suffered from fatigue and nosebleeds. It was terrible for André though. He felt, as he put it, like he was 100 years old with a temperature and vertigo. He phoned his wife backstage that evening and said something he had never uttered before. "This is not how I want my first concert day to go anymore." The relentless showman acknowledged for the first time that he might need to slow down. They called off the shows. 40,000 supporters were left out, and the man who took great satisfaction in never missing a show had to return home. This was not a passing fright. For years André had persevered through his illness. A viral infection in his inner ear caused him to lose his balance in 2010, which caused his tour to be disrupted and required months of recuperation. In 2019 he even performed while suffering from a high temperature. He kept the suffering hidden from everyone. Mexico, however, was unique. His legs trembled. He believed he couldn't wait, and he stated it out this time. When he returned to Maastricht, he made it plain. He had decided to stop torturing himself. Pierre, his son, who had already assumed the majority of the business duties, went one step further. He began to alter the planning of excursions. No more straining yourself to the limit, or making long, tiring journeys abroad. They began organizing more intimate, smaller performances, perhaps just in Europe. Mexico, most likely never again. Pierre was no longer just a manager of a company. He was now responsible for protecting his father. He had gradually relieved André of his burden over the years, by managing the personnel, logistics, and maintaining order. André used to want to be in charge of everything. He now had total faith in Pierre. After each near miss and health concern, their relationship had become closer. Pierre had taken over as the ship's captain behind the scenes, ensuring that his father could continue to pursue his passions, without having to put his life at danger. However, André's path has involved more than just musical highs and health crises. He encountered an unanticipated scandal in 2015 that was unrelated to music. At one of his well-known summer performances in Maastricht, 11 kids from a Romanian band performed. They performed with the legendary pan-flute player Gorga Zamfir. Everything appeared to be going well until André was hit with a hefty charge by Dutch officials who said the children had performed over the legally permitted working hours for minors. Even if it was eventually lowered, the €236,000 was still one of the highest cultural fines in Dutch history. André's group retaliated. They said that after 11 p.m., the kids didn't really perform. Technically, those children were directed by Zamfir rather than André, and they only returned to the stage to wave at the curtain call. The court ultimately sided with him after 2 years of legal fights. He did not work for them. The fine was dismissed. Nevertheless, the matter caused significant criticism and damaged his image. André Rieu never lost his human connection in spite of these shadows. André didn't think twice when a group of musicians with mental disabilities had all of their equipment stolen in 2019. He promised to replace everything after reading about it in the press, just like that. €20,000 worth of equipment. Kindness, without a huge statement or PR gimmick. Additionally, he provided 700 tons of steel to restore Notre Dame Cathedral after it caught fire. Silent actions that showed a side of him that wasn't constantly in the news. His priceless Stradivarius comes next. He almost had to sell it at one time due to financial difficulties. To keep it secure, he advertised it at a ridiculous price. And he removed it off the market after circumstances improved. There is more to the violin than simply wood and strings. He is a part of it. He currently sends his unique 1732 model to Vienna twice a year for maintenance. It is disassembled, varnished and maintained to perfection by a professional artisan. On every tour it is protected like a gem. Behind the smiling violinist lies a quiet empire kept together by family and a few unexpected secrets, even if André Rieu may be the face of the most cheerful orchestra in the world. It all begins with Marjorie, his wife. She is something more, something hidden, but most fans just view her as André's life companion. She has been penning orchestral music for decades without ever claiming credit. Instead of being in the spotlight, her art thrives in the music. Marjorie remained in the background while André rose to prominence, helping to shape the sound, direct the vision, and encourage him to try something else when the traditional classical music scene ceased to thrill him. She also pushed for the couple to make one of their most audacious decisions ever, purchasing a castle that was centuries old. The phone call was unexpected. While on vacation, their accountant informed them that Maastricht Castle, a relic of the 15th century, was for sale. Marjorie made a snap decision. She said, "Sell more records." The Rieu family suddenly purchased it. It was more than simply a house. It became the main office for the whole Rieu organization. André transformed the chilly, gloomy rooms into a cozy, light-filled dream world. He mixed Venetian, Bavarian, and Austrian styles in his own design. Today, the castle serves as a combination workplace, performance venue, and dream space. The echoes of music and the murmurs of family decisions that mold the empire are still audible deep within. The following generation is now entering that environment. Daisy, André's 9-year-old granddaughter, is already practicing on the piano with the orchestra. It's not an advertising gimmick. The Rieu heritage operates in this manner, quietly, gradually, with talent and love. André understands what it's like to grow up in the music industry. Daisy is now experiencing what he did. The Rieu family doesn't push their kids into the spotlight, just like her father Pierre did years ago when he went from working behind the scenes to becoming the business director of the orchestra. They wait for the music to start after opening the door and letting them inside. André Rieu was more than just a musician. Everything that made classical performances seem like chilly remote rites was destroyed by him. It wasn't about tuxedos, posture, or stillness as he took the stage. It has to do with happiness. He wanted you in the aisles if you wanted to dance. You were at the proper spot if you wanted to cry, clap, or sing. He was warning audiences not to worry about ball gowns during the late 2000s and early 2010s, unless they were going to spin around in them. People adored him for transforming the symphony into a party. Most classical concerts used to seem more like lectures than actual performances. Quiet audiences, stiff clothing, and restrictions so strict that you may get a harsh frown for just clapping at the wrong moment. Rieu detested that. He reversed the script because after years in traditional orchestras he was tired of the icy gap between musicians and listeners. His concerts, which were filled with emotion, laughter, and even fake snow when appropriate, started to resemble weddings more than recitals. This was shrewd, not simply rebellious. Before the majority of his rivals even understood what social media was, Rieu seized on it, while others clung to posters and newspaper ads. Rieu had already gone viral by the time other orchestras were debating whether Instagram was too informal. His rendition of Danny Boy in Dublin not only attracted admirers but also went viral, garnering millions of views akin to a music video that topped the charts. However, his use of the internet was much more brilliant than simply accessing it. Local themes, music, and information that seemed tailored to the place were all included in each tour stop. He drew them into the performance rather than merely inviting them. From surveys to previews, events to freebies, every aspect was designed to foster a sense of community. He gave the impression that everyone could enjoy classical music, not just those who were well-versed in Beethoven's symphonies. Then came the age of movies. Rieu took his shows to the big screen because he wasn't satisfied with selling out stadiums. However, he recounted a tale rather than shooting a stage and ending the day. He transports viewers around his homeland on a river excursion in his 2025 film The Dream Continues, combining live performances, home recordings, and behind-the-scenes videos from across the globe. It was no longer only about music. It has to do with emotion, recollection, and allowing the audience to enter his dream. The cinema theaters also had to change. Straightbacks and quiet were no longer the norm. People could now bring food, have some beverages, and relax for an evening that was more of a party than a movie viewing. Rieu grasped a straightforward yet potent idea. People are looking for a genuine feeling. That's what he handed them. Critics were harsh at first. They made fun of his enormous fan base, his theatrics, and his hair. He was dubbed the worst thing that had ever happened to classical music, but when economists and business schools began to take notice, things started to change. As other orchestras pleaded for money and performed in rooms that were only half full, Rieu was selling out venues and reaching the top of the charts. What had appeared to be gimmicks suddenly began to resemble survival tactics. Millions of people are familiar with André Rieu because of his captivating waltzes and kind smile, but his background is far worse than the media portrays. A guy who spent years in treatment, attempting to repair the harm caused by a distant and frigid father, is the driving force behind the sold-out tours and lavish performances. His own father never actually noticed him, never complimented his violin playing, and never expressed pride in him. André didn't even attend his father's burial since the anguish was so intense. He saw his brother leave the nation as a young man in order to avoid the same emotional upheaval. Even if the wounds are still there, treatment provided André a path ahead. André lives in a remarkably calm and pragmatic existence off stage. Although his admirers see him leading a lavish and glamorous life, he has been covertly accumulating real estate. The Netherlands is home to about 80 properties. It began following a significant financial catastrophe that nearly destroyed him. His Stradivarius violin and all else he possessed were once in jeopardy. He now invests in bricks and mortar rather than castles and fountains, since he discovered the hard way that aspirations can be costly. He was altered by the encounter. Even while his theatrical persona was still shining, it made him wary. André is currently preparing for a huge event, maybe even a final grand celebration, as he gets closer to turning 75. In what feels more like a farewell than a celebration, he will return to his birthplace of Maastricht for a series of concerts. Warning signals have already been raised by his health, with cancelled performances and worries about his longevity. He's not prepared to say goodbye though. André would sooner part with his priceless violin than fire every member of the orchestra, according to his son Pierre, who oversees the production firm. He has been with him for decades, and he cares about them that much. André simply laughs it off when someone mentions retiring, though he quips that he will continue to perform until he is 140. He's partly serious too. He persists because of that unyielding spirit. He still performs up to 100 shows a year at the age of 75, all the while traveling with a personal trainer and worrying about his sleep to keep focused. He genuinely thinks that music can cure. Fans and even medical professionals have told him that his shows are like medication. Perhaps it is the reason he won't stop, because every note that André Rieu plays is an act of reciprocation, a means of rewriting the suffering he experienced as a child, and of remaining youthful,